Welcome back to the Morning, Noon, and Night Show. I'm Mark Donato, and my next guest is an author and also a good friend, John Merson. John, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Mark.
The whole theme of today's show is Memorial Day and all, and if I may just hold your book up here quickly. John's written a book called War Lessons, and we're going to delve into this because this is not actually a book about war at all. Is that correct?
That's right. You know, we had a wonderful Memorial Day parade yesterday, and we visited a lot of monuments. Nantucket has quite a few. We had the Scouts and the Bagpipers. But I think what soldiers want from war is more than another monument. As wonderful as these monuments are, soldiers really want us to work as hard as we can to prevent the next war so that more soldiers don't have to die, more people don't have to be made into refugees, and the other harmful effects of war can be avoided.
Well, I like that. As a matter of fact, if I may just do one quick quote from you, I noticed that you wrote, you couldn't have written this book when you got out of Vietnam because you would have written about the war. And now you're able to go back and write about the lessons of war, which I thought was really poignant. And I have to say that would have been 1966, so you're writing this book 42 years later. How is it to try and conjure up all these images and thoughts when you're writing this?
Well, a classmate of mine at our 40th reunion asked the question, why are we at war with Islam? And what did we learn in our freshman history course that might help explain this? And it was a great question, started a lot of us thinking. And I just took one of my experiences as a soldier and tried to figure out what I had learned from it. And another classmate said, if you could make that into a book, I'd like to publish it. So that was the start of the work. And I just went to the Athenaeum every day after my real estate work was done and sat down and began writing. And I used the experiences that I had as a foot soldier as the starting point. And for each one, tried to figure out what I had learned from it and what we could do to make things better.
Well, that's fantastic. By the way, I love that touch that this book was written on Nantucket, on the second floor of the Athenaeum. You were going
entirely
sort of your office, your second office. Huh? So, well, I know now you're very large in going back to Vietnam. You were there in the war, but you have made a point of, I believe, 10 revisits. Is that correct?
Yes, I think many soldiers find themselves drawn back to the places where they had these experiences. Remember, we were young men and women, so these experiences had a tremendous impact on us, really in many ways forming our personalities. And I think it's true of veterans from the Civil War, World War I, World War II. I think many veterans are drawn back. And in Vietnam, it's certainly true that hundreds of thousands of American soldiers who fought in the war have gone back. And what's so striking to us when we first visit is what a warm and friendly reception we get from the Vietnamese people. The Vietnamese people really understand that Americans have a real connection to Vietnam because it is such a significant part of our history. And almost every person in Vietnam knows someone who's living in the U.S. And so that makes a difference too, where our two countries are in many ways joined at the hip.
It does. But in your going back there, you also have another motive. You're actually trying to bring some tech industry and help them out a bit. I believe you're a software industry person. Was one of your expertises?
Well, there's tremendous enthusiasm in Vietnam for all things technology related, and a lot of great technology companies have been started there. Also, quite a few of the Vietnamese who've come to the United States have worked in the technology industry at IBM and at Apple and many small companies. So I was able to bring Vietnamese software executives on a trip to the U.S. and then to bring U.S. technology executives on a tour through Vietnam to meet their counterparts. And this was a great way to help make a contribution to the country's moving on after the war.
That's very nice. That's a very kind thought, and I love to hear that things are like that. Now, your book is titled War Lessons, but there's sort of a subtitle, a hero comes in, because you actually volunteered for this war.
Yes.
Okay.
I had grown up in a family with a military history, and I really felt that I couldn't become a man, that I couldn't become an adult without this rite of passage that war was for me. And so I volunteered, and I found that many of the soldiers in my Marine infantry platoon had similar kinds of motivations. I think it's better if we can look beyond rote explanations like patriotism and say, what is it that draws young people to do something like this? For many, it was the chance to get out of the house, off the farm, into a job, to make something better for themselves. And I think for foot soldiers especially, we don't really know what the long-term effects of the war are going to be, whether it's really going to accomplish what the policymakers have set out as the objectives. But we hope that we can do something better for ourselves, our families, and the people around us.
Indeed. Well, I notice that you bring up, there's a recurring theme in the book that, that you feel that money is better spent now, on peacekeeping and on, and infrastructure building rather than on war, and you'll achieve perhaps the same effect, but in a far better way.
Well, I think that's true, and I also think there are many young people looking for a way to serve who wouldn't want to be part of the military, but if we can give them enough other opportunities to serve, the way the Peace Corps and Teach for America and various global work opportunities, volunteer opportunities have provided, we can probably give people an opportunity to really serve their country and the war and do something that doesn't involve destruction.
Correct. Okay. So, yeah, you say you went off to be a hero and then realized that war was terror.
Well, I think, we talk a lot now about the GI Bill. We're about to make what I hope will be a historic improvement in the GI Bill to help soldiers come back from the war. And I think we need to remember that besides a new GI Bill, we really need a GI Bill of Rights. Today, a soldier comes back from battle and has to begin a second war, which is the war to get medical care, psychiatric care, education, reintegration into society. And that can be as big a struggle as being a soldier was.
Indeed, yes, especially that particular war, coming back from Vietnam. Yes, you were not walking back into parades like we witnessed yesterday here, were you?
That's right.
No, that's now. So you also you are trying to get young people involved in prevent war movements. I know, and I myself actually have stood outside the post office with you in years past in a candlelight vigil that I believe you were the organizer for. Is that correct?
Yes.
Am I saying that? Okay. And that was sort of the stop the Iraq war and all now. So are you drawing similarities between our whole policy here in Iraq and Afghanistan and Vietnam, or?
I think every war is different. Every war has its own causes and origins, but there are certainly similarities across all war. And the worst aspect is that so many of them could have been prevented if we had worked harder at diplomacy, if we'd worked harder at peacekeeping, if we had really made the efforts that we could have made. And often we go into a war thinking it'll be short, not many people will get hurt, it'll be over, and of course each side thinks we'll win. But when we really look at the destructive power of war on human lives and the financial cost, there's got to be a better way. And I think that's something that many soldiers like myself feel strongly as they look back on their experience.
Indeed. Well, it's a moving book, and as I say, it's interesting that you wrote it years later, because it's not about the war, it's about lessons learned. And I was riveted. It's really incredible, and I have to say that going in, I thought, oh, this could be a little tedious, but it came out great. But John, how many years you been on Nantucket now?
10 years full-time,
Okay.
Another 10 years before that as a visitor.
All right, well, great. And I know you have a side job here. You sort of do restoration on historic homes here. So.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you're able to do that, but we are very pleased to have you on here, and this book is very special. And the fact that it was written at the Athenaeum and all. John, thank you so much.
Thanks for having
coming
me,
on
Mark.
Plum TV. We'll be right back with more on the Morning, Noon, and Night Show.